Thank you for being here, hearing about this trending word that is impact, that we use a lot in a lot of contexts. Hopefully after this session you will understand more what is an impact campaign and how do we mobilize people around a film. We have a great panel here with Subina Shrestha. You are a journalist, director and producer, and you have this amazing film, Debbie, and you're based in New York.
Yes, I'm based in all places, yes, but I'm from Nepal.
Mike Harris, you're CEO of 89 Up, which is one of the biggest and best impact agencies working for non-profit. You campaign for great causes, you tackle complex problems, and inspire people to take action. And you're based in the UK, in London, I think?
Yes, yeah.
We have Emilien Schenker, who is Impact Fund Manager at Storyboard Collective, and Storyboard Collective is one of the main European current funders in the impact ecosystem. And last but not least, Anna Castagnosa, you are head of Impact Days at FIFDH, Human Rights Film Festival based in Geneva, and it's an amazing program that a lot of film and a lot of filmmakers attend to. So we're going to start by the first question that we'll still need to explain. What is impact? What is an impact campaign? I'm going to start with you, Subina, and then
For me, impact is about ensuring that the protagonist is in a better position than when you started, ensuring that their ideas of what they want to achieve is supported by your film and as you go along. So pretty much it means putting your protagonist first before the film itself.
Is this a good time to talk about an impact methodology, or are we too early in the session?
Well, I think I think it's interesting to talk about methodology. But
Right.
Give us what, like in one short sentence, what is for you an impact campaign as a practitioner?
So films can have impact in of their own right. The campaign sits outside the impact naturally created by the film. So it's a methodology to create wider world impact off the back of a documentary film or a feature. That's my definition. And then in terms of sort of how we see impact, we sort of group it in three different buckets. I think films can have a sort of passive impact, which is sort of educational or knowledge-sharing impact. So I think a lot of filmmakers have strayed away from this as a form of impact, but awareness is really important. You can create a lot of awareness around an issue through a documentary film. And I was sort of thinking on the train up, someone was boasting about how many TikTok reels that they'd, the initial life. 5 million people saw TikTok. That's very interesting. If you have 100,000 people watching a documentary film, that is the equivalent of 720 million views on TikTok in terms of the actual amount of time spent as a metric, right? So actually sometimes we're a bit down on ourselves in documentary film, or for only 100,000 people being captured for 2 hours about a film. Actually that can be really powerful. The second thing in this bucket I would say is attitudes. Films can shift attitudes, they can seed new narratives on an issue. The middle crux of this, I would say, is behaviour change, which is active and on an individual level. So, for example, people can change their behaviour. They can fly less, they can eat less meat, they can stop eating industrial farmed, pork or salmon. They can change the way they vote. So, like in a democracy, that's a really important way in which individuals can shift behaviours, and that's an impact that can come out of films. And the final way that I would see film impact is systems change. So on a systems level, you can create change. That could be building a movement, bringing together unlikely allies, creating a kind of coalition around an issue. It could be companies behaving differently, companies changing the way they build things that don't catch fire as much, companies supporting action on climate change. And lots of companies have changed their policies on climate change actually as a result of documentary films. Or it could be a policy change, it could be a law changing, it could be the way the government does things or implements things changes. So I think there's a sort of active bit which is about big systems, there's a middle bit which is individual, and there's a kind of passive education bit, which I think sometimes documentary filmmakers underestimate, which I think is also really important.
Mhm. So would you say that impact is the art of change?
Yes.
Emilia, I'd like to have your point of view on what you understand, and you've been quite new, not in the funding part, but on the impact-specific film scenery. How did you approach this, and how did you understand it when you first?
I mean, it's very similar to what my fellow partners have shared with you. To put it simply, and not to be redundant, it's just take your film, expend the lifetime of it, get shit done, and make some waves. Put it simply.
The art of waves.
Yeah.
Anna,
I don't know what else I can say. Everything is said already. But yeah, for us, basically, we work with from filmmakers that come with very different films, and for us, it's basically an impact campaign is a strategy, a series of activities or actions that are designed with a film at the core of it, are designed in order to try to change things, whether it is a lower, smaller, simpler, modest level, or biggest, higher policy-making level.
Just want to sort of bounce back on what has just been shared with maybe one advice, not to get too lost in the details, but the semantics have like their importance, not only for us as practitioners in this field, but also on the legal side of things. And it reminds me of something that was shared by Sarah Moses from Together Films, and I know some people are in the room with us. Great people, by the way, for impact activities, among others, but it has an importance to define what is impact for you through your vision and your films, because there's no common shared legal definition of that. So it is important to take a minute to reflect on that for yourself and what you want to achieve and put it in the paperwork.
for me as an impact practitioner, a strategist, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Khadija Benouataf. I'm an impact strategist, and I'm a film builder in France and French-speaking countries specifically. And for me, an impact campaign is a mobilization strategy, and this is why we're talking about mobilizing allies. It's mobilizing allies around a cause and a film or another medium, because we work with film, but we can also work with other mediums. And we're going to have a talk about podcast tomorrow also, podcast and impact. But now we are talking about film, and I would like you to tell us what a film, because not all films are impact materials. And we hear a lot of filmmakers want to have impact campaigns for their films, but I think it's important for a filmmaker to ask themselves, what questions should they ask themselves before starting an impact campaign?
For me, I think I'll just give a little bit of background on the film to be able to explain it. So my film is called Devi. It's about a wartime rape survivor in Nepal who's been fighting for justice for all the other women like her, as the government was trying to erase them altogether. So one of the first things that happened to me was that when I wanted to make a very short film, and it was a 15-minute film that I was planning, and as we were sitting down, my protagonist, Devi, she asked me this one question. It's like, what if 100 women would go to this government and ask for justice? What would happen then? So for me, I mean, it was not even like a question. Like that was kind of a responsibility that was given to me, right? So how do you make that happen? How do you make that process? How do you build a system for her to be able to take these 100 women who didn't even exist at that point to go to the government and demand justice? So that, for me, was the first thing that, the first question. And then, like, who do I kind of reach out to? So once she asked that question, one of the first things that we ended up doing is hire an impact producer and build an impact campaign, because we were also challenging, it was a David versus Goliath kind of a story, you're challenging all the men in the state, and you need allies there, right? So for us it was kind of building that system, like national and international allies at the same time.
How do you advise filmmakers who come to you with a project, with a film, and saying, I would like an impact campaign for this film? How do you test them to know if you want to work with them or not? How do you choose them?
It's a really good question. I often like sort of ask them in the first sort of meeting what they're trying to achieve with the film, and I tend to go away and watch the film and just check that the thing that they view as the impact from the film is actually where the film could go. Because often filmmakers have spent so long working through a sort of creative process, they're so immersed in it, that actually they might not spot, look, this lends itself to an advocacy campaign which is going to mobilise these really unusual allies, and actually what we should do is the media strategy looks like, you kind of just see it in a slightly different way, because you're slightly removed, and I think filmmakers are telling a really powerful story. What you've got to do is, are there any sort of objectives that this film could speak to, but also make sure it's really authentically tied to the storytelling in the film. And that, I think, is often the challenge with impact campaigns, because you might go, actually we can use this to do this, and you go, well, how authentic is that in line with the story that's actually in the film? I think where impact campaigns go wrong is that they identify either the wrong objective, so they go down a route that actually the film isn't the best route for, or they don't go, well, actually this can work on multiple different layers, and lots of different partners might work with the film in a completely different way. So this film in a civil society setting, mobilising allies, could do this incredible thing. Then in its own right as a creative piece, it can sit in this plane, and this is what we wanted to do at sort of film festivals and for people that love documentary film. And so kind of thinking through your objectives in a multifaceted way is a good way of going, right, how can we use this one asset, this big picture storytelling, to do possibly multiple things?
So we're heading to the heart of the matter of my mobilization. What does mobilizing allies mean to you in the context of an impact campaign for a film? First, maybe.
I was telling these guys, like, you know, I do like Sun Tzu and the Art of War, because you just don't know who, like, you know, the kind of stuff that it ends up talking about. It kind of strikes that, you know, the allies can come from anywhere, and in many ways, like, designing an impact campaign then ends up like within. It's like fighting a war against the state, right? And for me, it felt like that. So it can come from anywhere. For us, I was very lucky in a sense. My protagonist, Devi, was also a politician, and she was quite willing to work with absolutely everyone. She was part of the so between 1996 and 2006, we had a civil war where, like, you know, thousands of women were raped, and there are only like 214 that has been kind of registered within the government's Driven Reconciliation Commission, and they, for the past decade, they didn't really do it. So for her to be able to make sure that, you know, any form of justice is met was to ensure that everyone, all the political parties within Nepal had to support her, right? So that meant, I mean, she couldn't work with, and she was a part of the Maoist party for a while, so she couldn't just work with them, she had to work with the opposition. You had to work with the media, and she was actually vilified by the media right at the outset, because they questioned the veracity of her rape. Work with them, but at the same time, it was also ensuring that she was safe. To ensure that she was safe, you had to work with the diplomatic community. So it's having to do all of this while creating a film. for filmmakers, it's a challenging process, but when you think about all of these issues, I think these allies end up supporting the film and ensuring that it happens. And for us, it was also another thing. I mean, we were dealing with a lot of trauma, so we worked with therapists right from the outset, and they became allies as well in a sense of like now they're working together with a bunch of survivors now. So.
We're going to show a trailer of Devi in just 1 minute, but I wanted to go to Anna. Who are the allies for an impact campaign? Who are the usual suspects in terms of allies?
Well, I guess it depends a lot on the impact goals for each campaign. Every campaign is different, and you might need different kind of partners. But if you want to affect, for instance, a community, the community portrayed in your film, or you wanna have the associations that work in the same topic of your film, you wanna have experts, but who knows how this community lives, what they are their problems, etc., who can help you also guide and navigate the campaign. You want to have also, in our case, we work a lot with different kind of NGOs, and also depending on the international level of the campaign, with the offices of the United Nations, for instance, because they can also help to, from an upper level, we can say, or they can help you also to find the right contacts in the territory where you're working with, where you're working on, and policymakers. It depends also a lot, as I said, on the goals. But you can have regular citizens as ourselves, or you can have high-level politicians. It depends always on what you want to achieve, I guess. And I think you need to keep your mind open, because you never know when you're gonna have. Suddenly, you can have great allies in communities that you didn't expect to, or in groups of people that you didn't expect to find them. So I guess keeping an open mind about it is important too.
Mike, you were talking about unlikely allies also.
Yeah, I mean, if we're trying to persuade people, it depends what the aim of the film is, but if we're trying to persuade people, maybe we find, and I would urge everybody to read Harry Hand's book, Undivided. It's about a church, evangelical church, and essentially what happens in this evangelical church in sort of Midwest America, the church becomes an unlikely ally in allowing free nursery provision provided by the state in this part of America, which is really racially divided, where the beneficiaries would have been mostly Afro-Americans and African-Americans. And I think the book's beautiful because it tells a story of essentially building coalitions within a space for an evangelical church that leads to this incredible political win in basically the heart of Trump's America. And I think when we talk about unlikely allies, we might be thinking corporations. We could be thinking about groups we may consider conservative, so regular faith groups. It could be trade union. It could be the trade unions if it's a film that doesn't necessarily touch upon the work of that particular trade union. So I think thinking beyond sort of the groups that we may automatically associate with an issue to build out a kind of broader movement, which is as broad as possible, often could be a really great route to place the film in a slightly different light.
And then once we found them is what they're going to do also. But so I'd like to have specific examples. So we're going to watch your trailer, the trailer of Debbie, and then we'll talk a little bit, and then you'll explain also, you'll share some examples of campaigns you've worked with. Could we show the trailer, please?
देवी खान का मेरो पाला आए जस्तो लाग्यो म आफैलाई बोल्न त यत्रो वर्ष लाग्यो हामी उस्तै भेट भयौँ हाम्रो व्यथा हुन्छ कथा हुन्छ भनिराख्नु पर्दैन र तपाईहरुले जस्तै भनेको बलात्कारको यातना मलाई पनि दियो बलात्कार जस्तो केसमा चाहिँ परेको साथीहरूको चाहिँ काहीँ पनि रेकर्ड पनि नरहने अनि के पनि नपाउने
7 जना 8 जना थियो मरिकिन भनेर छोडिदिएपछि मम्मी बाबा आएर लगमा चाहिँ भन्नु
मैले भोगेको घटनाको बारेमा छोरीलाई केही थाहा छैन मेरो छोरी शत्रुहरूबाट अहिले त सुरक्षित छ तर बलात्कारीहरूलाई संरक्षण गर्ने संस्कारको विकास भएको
मलाई म फर्स्ट टाइम एक्लै बसेको याद छ आई नेभर ह्याड समवन फर लाइक कति वर्ष
अलिअलि ऊ भएको हुन्छ फेरि त्यसलाई कुनै घरलाई लास्ट डेट उहाँलाई गराउँछ फेरि गाह्रो हुन्छ
मैले नबोले कसैले नबोल्ने रहेछ तर महिला मात्रले भोगेका घटनाहरू कुनै सम्बोधन भएका छैनन् र यो समाजलाई च्यालेन्ज गरिराखेका छौँ
तपाईँले विषय उठाउनु भयो तपाईँ उपयुक्त पात्र तपाईँ प्रधानमन्त्री भइसकेका मान्छे यसको प्रत्यक्ष यहाँ अनुभूति गरिसकेका मान्छे सबैले चर्चा हुँदैन
हाम्रो समाज जुन अवस्थामा छ त्यो महिला त बर्बाद भयो तिनको लागि चाहिँ खै राज्यले अभिलेखीकरण गरेको खै राज्यले क्षतिपूर्ति
धेरै केस छन् 314 केस चाहिँ
एक त 14 वर्षसम्म पार्टी पनि चुप लाग्यो सरकारले त झन् छुट्नै परेन
अबको बाँकी जति छन् त्यो चाहिँ ती गुमनाम भएकालाई पनि म बाहिर ल्याउँछु भनेर यो ल्याउनु भयो एकदम सराहनीय छ यहाँको काम
It is a very powerful film in itself. We were talking about the power of films, that they have this power. When did you decide that you wanted an impact campaign for the film?
The decision to bring an impact campaign was right at the outset, actually. When we started making the film, we realized that we needed to ensure that she was safe. So that was, safety was one issue that we needed to take care of, but at the same time, we need to kind of raise her profile internationally. And for that, as we were making the film, we didn't have the capacity to do that. So we started filming in 2020. By 2021 early, we had Think Films build an impact campaign for us. But that was, so that meant that by early 2021, Devi was already talking to UN Special Rapporteur for Sexual Violence. In 2022, she came and gave a speech at the Prevention of Wartime Sexual Violence conference in the UK. She gave a keynote speech. It was very, very powerful stuff that she did, but that was largely because of the impact campaign that we started. And the process of ensuring that we had this impact campaign in the beginning also kind of emboldened her in some ways. And I think this whole, I think the theory of change is that, right? You kind of start with, you put money where your mouth is, pretty much. And so, bringing in impact campaigns right at the outset really helped catalyze a movement in Nepal, which meant that in the beginning, when we started making this film, there were 314 cases registered. And by August of 2024, the law included wartime rape in just March we actually screened the film to survivors and ended up getting more testimonies, and 794 testimonies were someone to the government. The process of having to do this was kind of, the first impact campaign was for a particular audience, like, particular bunch of allies, and then you kind of we had to build like multiple campaigns in the process of making the film.
What were your impact goals at the start? I want to be very didactic here. So,
we were just hoping that a small bunch of women would kind of join the movement, and that Devi's voice would be heard, and Devi would be kind of not Devi would be, but wartime rape would be recognized in Nepal, because it was not included anywhere, and so that was it. We never expected that it would create a movement. So I think having those goals, I think the goals have to be reviewed all the time, and clearly we never expected it, and it's still going on. Like just today, today is the day of elimination of sexual violence and conflict, actually, and Devi is giving a talk on how to mobilize in Bangkok to a whole bunch of survivors, and films being screened there.
So where would you say that you have succeeded most in mobilizing?
I think more than where, I think the question is like, how is the question, right? I think it's believing, with these kind of films, for me, it was a woman who was never believed in. When one person believes in them, like a whole ripple effect can happen. And so for the filmmaking process for me was that, I believed in Devi. I had a producer, it's like a whole bunch of women believing in a whole bunch of women, pretty much. That's how it started. And it just created this ripple effect. And also, really putting them first. So the last scene that last bit that you saw where Devi had a breakdown, we realized that survivors need a lot of, they need support. Like in the first time we talked to Devi, we realized that we needed to hire a therapist. And the therapist went with us absolutely everywhere. And that also meant that all of these women ended up owning the film later. And so they're using it to gather other women, talking about the importance of addressing sexual violence and conflict. And it's kind of gone beyond Nepal. So so I think it's the process of trust and giving them the time and whatever they need in order to get to heal in many ways.
But you use the film as a tool.
Yeah,
to mobilize. And you were telling me earlier, as I was talking, you mentioned something that happened with politicians.
Yeah, so there's the process of making the film catalyzed a movement, but at the same time we used the film after it was done to mobilize survivors as well as kind of screen it to the community. But because Devi is a politician as well, we really kind of we used to laugh about it. Like there's a line where in Sanskrit where politics is about using samdam nandamid, which is division, bribery, any means possible, pretty much. So we used that. So at one point, when the film was being made, we didn't screen the film to people in Nepal for a long time because it would have jeopardized people, jeopardized women. So, but it also meant that the government was very agitated, and a lot of the people within the government didn't want the film to be screened. So what we did at one point was we got politicians from all parties, survivors and diplomats in one room and pretty much locked them in. And when the survivors started telling their stories, the politicians got so agitated. They hadn't heard these stories. They were so gruesome and so disturbing that they just put their hands up and saying, we'll just do anything. And that's how the law changed. So it's these kind of strategies, as I said, like it was a very good way to try and figure out how to do this. One has to do whatever is needed. And we kind of try to at least put these two things. One is to make a good film and tell a good story, but at the same time ensure that this telling of the story is going to move their goals as well. And that is what putting survivors first, so putting protagonists first has also meant. And also, and this obviously impacts a lot of decisions. Doesn't make everyone happy, but I think those are the decisions that you have to make.
Thank you for sharing this. Mike, you have also examples of campaign you've worked with. Did you also put people in one room and oblige them to listen or to watch?
No, not a film, but I went to the Royal Bank of Scotland was selling Belarusian government bonds.
Right.
And I took the Belarus Free Theatre to go up and see banking executives, and all of their friends were in prison. And they sat opposite these bankers who say, well, no, we sell it's a technical, market-based solution. This is why we hold the Belarusian laws. And Natalia from the Belarus Free Theatre said, well, I'm going to show you how Belarusian guards rape women in prison. Right, so this is what I'm going to do. And she stood up and they just froze. This is what she wants to do. And she said, well, for my friends in prison, you're going to issue me a statement tomorrow morning saying you were never going to sell Belarusian government bonds again. Next morning we got our statement. And they did it. And the currency fell 50% over the course of 4 days. And all the prisoners got out of prison. But that was a theatre maker who just went and confronted these corporations and looked them in the eye. And they all got, when hearing human testimony, they just caved. And probably the most impressive piece of advocacy I've ever seen in kind of real life, because it was that sort of first person testimony.
Could you share with us a little bit of work that you've been doing?
Yes.
Campaigns. I think you.
I've left my
click. Where's the click?
I've not given a click and I just left it.
It's here, so if I think it's
sorry. Completely useless.
It's there. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant! Right.
Oh, you forgot it.
Hey, there we go. Thank you. Sorry. Right, there we go. We'll do that. Right. So this is a film called Undercover. And it was a film. Does anyone see it? It was on Channel 4. Mm-hmm. Brilliant film, and it's undercover with the British far right, and it's about the emerging trend of eugenics, and it sort of ends with a Silicon Valley funder paying for hardcore racist propaganda. Right, so there's a Silicon Valley link at the very end of the film. And so we were brought in to help work on the impact campaign, and so we were thinking about what we wanted to do, and sort of the film was going to work in a series of parts. So there's a bit that was about Silicon Valley, and that was going to be, and we basically want that to launch just in the run-up to the US presidential election. There was a bit which was around London Film Festival, and a sort of big moment we wanted to create around one of the strands in the film, which was around sort of rise of eugenics and sort of like bogus academic theories around race. And then there was some really sort of great undercover footage of some of the sort of old, kind of far-right political parties in the UK and kind of how they were talking and sort of, real exposure of their sort of disgusting views. And we knew this was a year ago, so we knew there was probably going to be a change of government. We knew the Labour Party was going to probably win the election. It looked near dead cert. So we wanted to really position this with a really core group of allies that was the incoming government. And we wanted to say, this is going to be a major issue in your in-tray, the far right, and you now need a proper community cohesion strategy to deal with it. And I think one of the successes of this impact campaign was that the filmmakers had worked with the group Hope Not Hate, which are an anti-fascist organisation here in the UK, And so we had a really great engineering partner. It's really well connected. We had filmmakers who told this incredible story, and we had this political change that was happening. So what we wanted to do is really wanted to get this in the inbox of the government. So we built a strategy that was around trade unions, organisations that influence the incoming Labour government, and we did our launch was at Channel 4 with the Culture Secretary of the United Kingdom. We had ministers see it, we did a parliamentary screen. It was absolutely directional at influencing the government. And I think what was nice about it is we sort of thought about the media that was going to be consumed, the media that would influence the governments. We had like the Mirror, which is really influential for sort of Labour Party people and trade unions, the Guardian, they had that package already built. So the media really spoke to, and over a series of weeks, different bits of the film came out. So it wasn't as if we had one big press moment, we actually had the different stories in the film landed at different times. Now, the interesting thing about strategy is two big things happened. One, there were far-right riots in this country last summer. And so suddenly the film went from being, there is this threat from the far right to, bloody hell, like we saw a number of British cities literally on fire. So the film suddenly became much more pointed, and our advocacy actually honed in on this sort of community cohesion bit. And the second thing that happened was the London Film Festival pulled the film. So they saw the riots, and they pulled the film. And so we suddenly had this film that was attended by the Culture Secretary of the United Kingdom, which the London Film Festival wouldn't show. And we had, so we very quickly pivoted and basically made the story about how the fear of the far right had become so big that actually even film festivals were pulling back and showing films. And that went like absolutely massively and caused a really big debate. But what's great about the film now is that lots of trade unions engage in the process. There's sort of lots of different stakeholders who are going to use this film as a tool for sort of wider awareness around the impact of the far right in communities. The next film is called A Total Trust. Has anyone seen Total Trust? Yes. Brilliant film. It's about Chinese state surveillance and dual-use technologies that facilitate it. Really sensitive, and a number of the people that are actually in the film end up being sentenced and put in prison after the release of the film. So the strategy for this was actually quite specific. We wanted the banning of the export of dual-use technologies into China. So lots of European companies were building technologies that would be used to build this incredible total surveillance system in China. And so the ask was quite pointed, it was around these specific technologies. So we built a strategy where we linked individual screenings at film festivals with a specific advocacy strategy per film festival. So if you think of a circuit where you go to maybe 15 international film screenings, you're doing one in the Netherlands, who are the Dutch politicians in the room? What's the Dutch press strategy? What messages do we have? What companies in the Netherlands are exporting these technologies? Who's to blame? What do we want the Dutch government to do? Italy, what's the strategy for the Italian government? Which political party is going to do the middle? It was literally that granular. And so when the film went and did this sort of international circuit, at each film festival we had a really clear view of who do we want in the room, so we weren't creating a whole new series of screenings. We actually used the film circuits to act as those kind of hubs. So the strategy was based around it. We then had we identified two kind of key audiences, sort of key jurisdictions we wanted the film to work in. One was the European Union, because the European Union essentially sets rules that are adopted pretty much everywhere in the world now. You'll see it on climate. US corporations are going to basically follow EU standards on disclosure. So we thought, well, actually, we need the EU to act on this. So we had a parliamentary screening within the European Parliament, and we thought really carefully about which MEPs from which groups we wanted together. So we made this a security issue. It wasn't just a human rights issue. This is about security of Europeans. We made it a business issue. Actually, how can these surveillance technologies be used to hack European corporate secrets? We really threaded through a lot of different narratives to appeal to the right of the European Parliament as well as the left of the European Parliament. And what we ended up was a really great screening where we had lots of different political parties and political groups raising the issue of dual-use technologies. And finally, in the UK, which had a very specific relationship with China, for lots of very long historical reasons, but the Hong Kongers were, there's a big migration of Hong Kongers to the UK, and all the Hong Kongers are now under threat from China here. And so we sort of really wanted to engage the diaspora community that was in the UK around this issue, so that they could act and work with parliamentarians to ensure that British companies weren't also involved in this export of dual-use technologies. So, two very different films. In both, we sort of recognise, like, where are we trying to create change? What's the sort of advocacy objective? For Total Trust, it was really specific, it was around dual-use technologies. The first one was actually around kind of getting the government to put this at the top of their intro. And actually, the screenings really did help do that, because it showed the current evolving nature of far right, and a lot of that is going into the revised PREVENT strategy, which is sort of anti-terror strategy that's coming up. So.
We're talking about strategy, and I wanted to ask you about some unconventional strategies. And have you, you've all been in festivals lately and in impact programs, and maybe Emilia, have you seen or supported some strategies that were a bit different or bold or unconventional?
Unconventional? I wouldn't say so. To what to Mike's points earlier, most of the campaign often in time come up with, okay, we want to have our campaign seen, we want more awareness, we want outreach. Yes, we can rely on universities, for educational purposes. At times, you may encounter a campaign that might go to an extent of aiming for on the policy-making level, as you know, or you've been involved with those type of projects as well. But I think we're also in a moment where there's a shift, as like there's a need to come up with different ideas, different marketing approaches to really like get the film seen, but then to activate and mobilize the different stakeholders, parties that might be of use for the general goals. We've had some successful campaign, like I'm just thinking top of my head, like The Illusion of Abundance, who was set in Latin America, aiming at the corporate and the policy-making levels all the way to Europe, and really like making a case for land defenders, or Delicado, set in Philippines, with also land defenders, and then aiming at a 50 years ban on this issue. So we've had some successful cases, but I feel like there's also a shift happening within the industry, like as a whole, around distribution and how you get your message across. I think, just to bounce back on also what you said earlier, it really comes to the questions that one might have when engaging with an impact campaign. What general questions are you really striving for? And then, with that in mind, yes, we may find some allies down the line, but you might also find opposition. And so your strategy as well need to take that into consideration, not only care for your protagonist depending on the subject matter, but also political position and so on. So to each campaign and each film its own strategy and own ways and own tools. But it's really how will it stand out? I'm looking forward to the next campaigns that we might come across.
Anna, have you, in the Impact Days, seen some mobilization strategies that have particularly inspired you, or?
Yes, I mean, there's been some cases that are very complex and very interesting. Coming back to The Illusion of Abundance, for instance, this is a film made by Mathieu Lieter and Erika Gonzalez. They're filmmakers and the producers of the film. and they were filming basically in Latin America, different countries of Latin America. They were portraying 3 land defenders and water defenders, 3 women. And I remember that they engaged with NGOs all around Europe and Latin America while in production. And it was funny because I remember Matthew telling me, like, we promised them everything before finishing the film and having a distributor, and suddenly the distributor came and said, what have you done? You have given like the rights to show the film everywhere without it. There was this moment like conflict, but it was great because they are great negotiators, Matthew and Erika, and very convincing filmmakers also. And they managed to have like, I don't know if it was 30 NGOs in Europe and different countries in Latin America that helped them to, on one hand, on communications, outreach. In Europe, they focused more in going to the European Parliament and working more on a policy level, because many of the companies that were operating in those Latin American countries where the problems of the land were happening were provoked by companies that are based in Europe. So they had this first part of the campaign here, where they had also the contact, they had lawyers, they had politicians talking to them and receiving them to watch the film, talk to them. And then they went to Colombia, Chile, Peru, Bolivia, Mexico, and they had NGOs all around ready to help them. And I love this because that meant also that a part of their campaign was not financed, that they need to pay for everything, because they were welcomed by all these NGOs and people and communities even, ready to show the film, to discuss about it, to go to administrations in every community to talk more about it. So I wouldn't say it was unconventional, but my feeling was that it was really ambitious, with a film that at the beginning they thought, they even didn't want to go to big festivals. They said, our campaign is going to be based in environmental film festivals. Doesn't matter if they are big or not. I mean, if they are big, great, because we will have more press, more visibility, but otherwise it's fine. We're not going to stop the film because of that. And I had a feeling that they had this, they dreamed big, very big, and they were clever in the way of strategizing the campaign in different stages all along 3 years. And I think that was unconventional, not because of the kind of actions they made, but because of so many allies they brought for each territory and for each specific goal they had in all of those territories.
And it went on for what, 3 to 4 years? I mean,
They're still running,
Start small, and then gradually down the line you will draw in more partners, more people joining the effort, and you never know. You just like keep on building as you progress, and in their case, it turned out to be quite impressive.
Yeah.
But how do you choose the right partners? How do you know that a partner is the right partner for your campaign? Like maybe, and Subi.
Do you need partners? I mean, look, one challenge is, you might build a massive NGO coalition, but what are you giving the NGOs that is actually relevant to their day-to-day activities? And I do think with NGO budgets under enormous pressure, you've really got to make sure that the partnership is more than the sum of its parts. So by bringing an NGO, the NGO gets something which is indicative, it helps their mission statement. And then the film acts as a sort of, the sort of wider impact is amplified. And I think and so when you're mobilising these coalitions, it might be worth actually just working with one singular NGO partner that just owns that project, owns that film, and it's a really great synthesis. It may be that you actually are working across multiple jurisdictions, and actually you want a coalition in Spain, you need a coalition in Italy, and you're going to have different local partners that are going to act as. So I suppose it's really context specific for the film. Well, I think what everyone has. Sorry.
No. Good.
I was just going to say one thing that is definitely true is taking the voices from the film and then finding appropriate ones. So the voices of the film and being core to the impact strategy, I think, is critical. And just very quickly, I'm going to mention this. He said what unusual approaches. Here we worked on a TV documentary, People versus Climate Change, ordinary people going through the UK Climate Citizens Assembly. And the impact campaign around this worked really well because we just had normal people, and then in their own words, we basically used different media verticals to talk about some of the different issues that were facing climate change. So Mark, who's the guy with the beard on the left, he's a veteran, he fought in Afghanistan, came back to the UK, trained as a boiler fitter, and now he's fitting heat pumps. So you had someone that had been in the British Army who was talking about climate change and their work in fighting climate change. That is a really that's a really unusual story that resonated with a whole different group of people that we normally engage with in climate space. And then the next lady across, Amy, that's her coal. She lives in Yorkshire. She lives in South Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, and she's still got coal in her house. And her son's asthma is aggravated by the coal. So we had her writing to politicians being like, I'm in this film, I'm the star of this BBC documentary, but my personal story is I've still got coal in my house. Can we do the basics on fighting climate change? And I think actually just working with each of the protagonists in the film and driving through the impact strategy actually was in 5 parts because we had 5 different people. We had 5 different almost micro campaigns around the protagonists in the film, and that ended up working really, really nicely because each protagonist had their own authentic thing that they wanted to achieve.
What happens when the goals of the film's campaign, for instance, you have specific goals, sometimes your protagonists, the communities have specific goals that you want to help and push forward, and what happens if it clashes or if they're not totally aligned with some partners that you have on board? How do you navigate this?
I think for me, it's pretty simple. It was pretty simple. You just have to make that decision and take the call, right? As a director, producer. So, for example, the narrative that everyone knows is coming to the West is the problem, the solution to a problem, right? So, for me, as a film, to end the film with Davy giving a speech in this massive crowd of 500 people, including Duchess of Wessex or whatever, Countess, whatever, something that one of the royalties were there. Having that would have been better for the film, but that would not take the campaign forward. That would not be, that would not help Davy or the survivors. So you just have to take that call at a certain point and just say, okay, this is the way that I want to do it, and if you want to pull the funding, that's it. I mean, to be very fair, we hardly got any funding right at the outset because we did not fit into any category. It was a conflict that ended a long time ago. Nobody really cared about it. Some of the decision makers actually said, why should we care? So the idea of while making the film is how do you make people care? So that's an extra burden on the filmmakers that you have to take into account.
Yeah, I also think that for this question and the previous one about what do you expect from your partners, etc., or if your goals change, I have the feeling that it's like producing a film, producing a documentary film. I mean, you need to wonder why you want to make this campaign and look for partners who are aligned with that why. And you can have partners for the bigger view of the campaign that you need to be very aligned with, also with the goals. That needs to be also people who, if the goals change, you can have an open communications way to exchange, to see together how to face those challenges, those changes of goals. And and in the same way also that when you're filming a documentary film, the story, you never know sometimes how the story is going to end. The campaign is a little bit the same. I mean, you can have a plan, but that can change easily because you don't have the control in everything you're going to do from now in 2 years. Not only for your campaign, you don't know what is going to happen in the world. So it's like, I think that at the end, the best advice for this, or what we try to say to the filmmakers who come to Impact Days, for instance, is have a plan, but stay open and try to get allies and partners who are, especially if you're gonna leave the campaign for a long term, try to be aligned in the values you have, in the vision you have. Make sure that the difference of vision, because you can have some differences, but that you solve them in a way that is good for everyone. In other ways, a partner might go or leave you at some point. Maybe that can happen. It happens in productions as well. It can happen in an impact campaign. We try to always have everyone happy, but sometimes.
Emilia, you are a partner.
Yes.
As a partner, how is it? I mean, how do you align your values? Is it something that's really important, or do you have? What's your agenda as a partner when getting involved in a campaign?
I mean, I would say there's a certain level of intentionality that is very important for us to have. I don't know if maybe we wanted to.
I think later, because I'm going to ask you to go much more into the details of what are you expecting. But right now, I'm more thinking about, and I want to go also talk a little bit about ethics, because in Impact Campaign, we talked also about unlikely partners, and sometimes you can partner with brands, sometimes you're going to partner with corporate companies, sometimes, some of them want to give money, and some of them, like for instance, Total in France gives money for films and impact campaigns. It can be a problem for some filmmakers. So how do you navigate the ethical considerations also?
For us, I mean, we don't come up with any demands or, for us, we really trust that the filmmakers who want to engage with an impact campaign will decide for them. They will decide for themselves how they want to position themselves, who they want to work with. But we also see ourselves within the philanthropic sector as like enablers and active funders, meaning we want to stay in touch. We love very much the opportunity to learn. And so I would say, like, in making partnerships, and also always think beyond the check, and it goes both ways. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not only a matter of like getting a partnership and then having money. It's really about shared intelligence that can be exchanged. Because honestly, for us, if we can manage to convince other philanthropic partners to get on board, to pay attention to the film, that might resonate with their priorities, and they would be willing to show up and share a little bit of their funding pool, then amazing. If it's for us as funders, we can support and, let's say, show up in a room and be helpful in making a coalition or getting your message across to other parties who might be not so open to it, then I don't see any problem with that. Of course, ethics matter, but it's really up for the people to decide what they want to do with it. Yeah.
Who do you accept the money from?
I think one of the things that I think what I want to address is like, whose story counts, right? And whether you need to make a film first to be able to make an impact. And for us, it was a nightmare trying to get any form of an attention to a conflict that had ended such a long time ago, and women who did not really matter. And I can very safely say, until wartime rape stories from Ukraine didn't happen, we did not get any attention. Right? So it's also what you said, like, what's happening in the world, like, are you capturing the zeitgeist of the moment? And you're talking about, how many stories of wartime rape from, like, the entire continent of Africa comes out. It's impossible to get funding for it, next to impossible. And, like, trying to run an impact campaign. But saying that, we had to self-fund initially, and we got funding from Korea later to finish the film, because that's largely also because of comfort women, right? So those, you have to go beyond what we see here, looking into Western donors, right? And Western partners. So you have to kind of look beyond that. And then we got like, I mean, you guys came on board at a point where like, you know, all these survivors needed the whole process of my film, like they went from one place to the other and tried to build a coalition of all these women, and they decided to make an organization. But who's going to fund this organization, right? And how do you do that? And so when we reached out to the Storyboard Collective, they were the first ones to give a small amount of funds for them to establish an NGO. And so it's those things that kind of like us. And at a certain point, like I call out friends trying to kind of raise some funds, like because we could make a noise. I would literally call a friend and say, I need like $9,000 tomorrow. Or like, you know, next week. So those are the things, like you just do whatever is needed, and all those people end up being allies in the long run.
Mike, do you have a red line in terms of partnerships, allies?
We don't take money from oil, gas, tobacco, office ones, boring. We don't take money from foreign dictatorships. And actually there's a lot of money coming in from certain regions of the world that have very well-established national sovereign funds, which are paying for lots of films. And I think we wouldn't take it. I know some filmmakers have, and they've had good reason to do so, but that would be a red line for us.
It's not that easy to navigate this, and you know there are no ready-made answers. I think everyone has their own answer to that. But it's important to have the conversation anyways. We have 14 minutes left, so I'm going to go to more individual questions, and I would like you to tell us how can festivals like yours, FIFDH, serve as a bridge between the filmmakers and the allies they need for their campaigns, and maybe you can tell us more.
Yeah, I'm not sure if. So is the green one right? I need you guys. I'm not sure because very quickly I just brought a couple of pictures to show something. Okay, I'm gonna go first to this one. So something we do at the FIFDH, and also there are other film festivals right now doing that. Movies That Matter or Documentale now in Berlin Animal Festival as well. Or some of the, especially festivals in the Human Rights Film Festival Network, we are trying to. When we bring filmmakers who have a project and they are interested in doing an impact with it, that's our social impact with it, we try to bring in the same room representatives from NGOs, international organizations. In our case, it's a very specific place we live in because Geneva has one of the headquarters of the United Nations, so there are not only all the offices of the United Nations, but also more than 700 NGOs, the huge ones, but also very small ones, working in very specific countries. I don't know, let's say Action for Development that works specifically on supporting the education of girls in Afghanistan. So we have a wide range of NGOs working in very different topics and territories. And also there's an interesting ecosystem of philanthropists and foundations, some of them interested in not investing, but funding actions for impact campaigns. So, but we realized very quick, 7 years ago when we started with the Impact Days, that filmmakers came with a way of speaking of their storytelling, of their films, but NGOs have a totally different way of speaking about the same topics. So we created a workshop for NGOs. This year, those are pictures of the workshop this March. We had around 32 organizations come in. Some of them come every year, so they understand already what we do. For those who are new, here was another part of the workshop, and what we were doing was a small round table where we gave them a short synopsis of a film, and we asked them, all of them, to play a different role of potential allies that they could be. Like, you are a radio station, a local radio station, you are an advocacy officer in a huge NGO, you are like this, giving them this role play. And we were moderating, trying to make them imagine potential ways of collaborating around this film. So that makes them that made them understand that indeed there's things that can be done, especially to collaborate and to put all the efforts together. And then they came later on to the Impact Days and they listened to the 12 pitches that we have of impact campaigns. And at least now, after 5 years of doing also this working with them, we understand that when they sit them in the table with filmmakers, they speak the same language. At least they understand what we are doing, right? We are trying also to do that with foundations and philanthropists. We need to, we are thinking of a strategy to offer them sort of similar workshop as well. And another thing that I think we can do from festivals in order to support filmmakers to get in touch with different kind of allies is what we offer in the screenings of the film. For instance, here in the top picture, this was a panel we made after the screening An Unfinished Journey, which is a film about 3 women who were politicians in Afghanistan. They had to flee the country in 2021. We had one of them, the one in the middle, she was the former Minister of Mines and Industry in Afghanistan. And we created a panel of experts on the topic of the International Geneva that could talk also about all the problem that is happening in Afghanistan. So after that, we invited a series of potential stakeholders who were also in the cinema within the audience, and we facilitated a meeting afterwards so that they could discuss potential ways of improving the impact campaign or supporting the impact campaign. So I think this is the kind of things that we have the resources to do and to offer to filmmakers, I would say, to summarize.
Emilia, just to you, and then we'll take some questions, because everybody wants to know, as a funder, what are you looking for? What are you expecting?
This is basically how we screen projects. I don't have any other ways just to put it. I try to be as explicit and transparent as possible, because one thing that is for sure, there's no shortage of film being made, and I mean, from impact perspective, I mean, we can only rejoice that more filmmakers want to engage with that kind of work. It doesn't facilitate the shortlisting for me and for other partners in this field. But it really starts with the film, of course, so we have some non-negotiables, so we really support non-fiction feature films, and then the rest is up for discussion. So usually we would look at the stage of development, we would favor projects that are nearing completion, or that have at least 50% of their production budget secured, because it's really a matter of if you're a filmmaker and you know this way better than I do, it takes a lot of time to get a film done. So by the time you are actually done with it, are you still in a position and still have the energy within yourself to do that work? So it's just a matter of approaching impact when it is the right time. Some would argue otherwise, and it's totally understandable as well, but it's just for us where we would be drawn to. Cinematography, I mean, we want some artistic, compelling films. It has to provide entertaining effect or carry an entertaining element to it, but also considering the storytelling part of it, we gravitate towards stories that have that tackle systemic issue, that have a bit of an investigative tone to it, and of course we are essentially supporting a project that deals with human rights, social justice, democracy, and environment. And is it also only doom and gloom within the doc world, or is this more to it that can actually leave people wanting to do something more that is a little bit hopeful? I mean, it's just something, it's how can the film stand out? And I mean, it is very subjective at the end, I agree. The second part is really people that are behind all of this. We would rather work with independent filmmaker, because we think that whenever you're commissioned, or if you're working for a broadcast, then your vision is not compromised, but there's a bias in there. So it comes with a certain level of intentionality and proximity to the communities that you work with, and that's where we decided to pay a little bit more attention to that. Again, vibe check, as some partners in the room reminded me not so long ago. Yes, we want to work with people who are collaborative, who wants to learn, who are humble, who are generous in their sharing as well. It goes both ways, and something very crucial is like a team alignment between filmmakers, producers, and impact people that are actually carrying this work all together, because if there's not a strong alignment from the beginning, then it can result in certain issues down the line. So are there canon people that we want to root for? And the third part is impact in itself. We essentially provide support to films dealing and focusing on the global south. So as some of you shared before, is it relevant? Is there an urgency still? Is it the right momentum? Is there someone actually fully on board to carry on the impact work? Who would benefit the most from this work? Is it which communities are part of this? And also, is there an appeal to other parties, to other philanthropies potentially? And can this echo somewhere else? One issue in one specific region, in one country, can also be translated, or other people can relate to that elsewhere as well. So it's all of this all together that we try to look at whenever we consider getting behind a project. And here is the main recent ones. I don't know, you have the subtitles hiding a part of it, but we decided to, over the last 4 years, we've supported 30 impact campaigns, and this year we got on board with 10. And so if you want to learn more, feel free to check us out on social medias as well.
Thank you. That's precious intel, actually. And it's important when you want allies, I'm sure you agree with me, to know what they're really interested in, and before approaching them. We have time left for questions. I have one question here. So I don't know if everybody knows that you could actually, the QR code if you wanted to add a question, but I think that there are also mics around in the room. I have one question here that I'm going to read to you. As filmmakers, we focus on the story and on how to move an audience so the story stays with them. Would you suggest incorporating narrative devices for impact campaign use within the film in planning stages? And if so, what kind? I'm not sure I understand.
No, I think the answer is you focus on the film. I think telling a good story, that for me is the most important thing. The impact campaign is parallel to it, and most of the times, I mean, with my experience, I would say that if you're telling a story in a way that you are taking care, the duty of care for the protagonist, if you put that front in the front, that would end up bolstering your impact campaign anyway. The impact campaign is parallel, not overtaking the storytelling. I think you just have to be true to your story.
Are there other questions in the room? No? Here? Yes.
Yeah, thanks, that was really fascinating, and an area that, even though I've been a filmmaker 25 years, I know, I mean, in the past it was called PR, but what you're talking about is not that. It's much more kind of engaged and socially conscious, which is fantastic to hear. But what about this idea of the echo chamber? You know, the fact that the impact is only impacting the people who already want to see it and who already know about it and agree. I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges, isn't it, is to try and get to people who aren't that interested or don't even believe in it. So I just wondered what you, if you had strategies for that. Although I think you did mention a little bit about getting within the campaign, being able to bring in people. But I think it's a real danger, isn't it, that we all, as filmmakers, live in this echo chamber.
I think, for me, it's like just building alliances outside that echo chamber. I mean, that's the first thing that you reach out to, and that's why I kind of keep on saying Sinzu, which is really kind of silly, but it really does help. Like, for us, we just did a whole series of screening across Nepal, and really brought in politicians who really, they don't actually agree with the film. They were the ones who wanted to erase it, right? So we put them with the protagonist, had these discussions, and also as it was being screened across, like, you know, a lot of people from grassroots communities, they wanted to support the film, and they wouldn't have thought about it. I mean, we screened at the House of Lords over here. That made an impact in Nepal. Like, so how do you kind of reach out to these different groups and kind of send that message back to show that, you know, that we are there's a, it's not an echo chamber, but it's like, you know, cause and effect that you actually try to build.
Joanna? If I may, for us, for instance, from the Human Rights Film Festival, something that we discuss a lot about as well, and Marty can also say it because Movies That Matter does that a lot as well, is that we were thinking about how do we, I mean, our films, when we go to the regular cinemas with the festival, we are pretty totally convinced. I mean, those are people who always come to this. So how can we go further than that? So we decided to create those programs to take the films to schools, hospitals, prisons, refugee centers. We're taking the films to people who usually wouldn't come to watch those films. And not only that, but for instance with Undercover, the film that we were mentioning before, we took it to school, to high schools, with kids of 17 years old, and we were 17, 18, and we were creating discussions afterwards. And it was super interesting to see their responses, because this is not a film they would watch at home, nor in the internet, not in the television at all, because they wouldn't be interested in that. So we take the film to them and we make sure we have a discussion, a good discussion where we can show things and exchange and understand what they feel about it and how things maybe can be changed in the future. But this is at the core of our discussions always, like how can we take, right, the film further, because the convinced are already convinced, and it's good still to make an impact on motivating them still. I mean, we need to still motivate those who are already fighting the cause, but of course we need to also live and go further than that, I agree.
I know we're ahead of time, but Mike, please.
Just often the impact campaign is taking the film out of the echo chamber. That might be the bit that actually is the bit that gets funded, and so we took Citizen 4, which ended up winning the Oscar. We took that, and our German distribution campaign, impact distribution campaign, was we showed it on a military base in Germany. So we had the head of the one of the heads of the German military, watching this film about US state surveillance on a military base, and then we did a screening at the Bundestag. So it was like really got it into the heart of the kind of like, and so actually your impact campaign, often the purpose of it is to literally break that echo chamber and take it. So you might have a cinematic distribution, the impact campaign may be a totally different set of people in totally different spaces.
That's exactly what we did. Like, we just screened it with the British Army, and we're in conversation with the Nepali Army and the Nepal police to do this.
Can I ask, I'm sorry, I haven't quite managed the time, right, but just one quick question.
To me?
For all of you, what's our power? We started with the power of us. What's our power as storytellers and individuals?
The power to change. I think the act of storytelling, act of telling the story for the protagonist, makes them kind of think about what they're saying. Like, everyone tells their own narratives, but once you start listening to your own narratives, your vision becomes clear, right? So for storytellers, like, the one thing that I did was showed clips to Devi as we were going along, and that really focused her vision. And so that really helped, right, in building her own campaign, or like her own process of trying to get to justice. So I think that's the power that we have. Like, the power of storytelling is being able to change things.
I was once in a room on the Swiss Alps with the world's leading experts on the built environment, on urban landscapes, and these head of someone from Princeton and Yale, and they were talking about advertising. They were talking about the power of advertising over us. And I said, name one advert in the last year that's really moved you. Oh, it went so long David advert. I said, $1 trillion a year is spent on advertising. I said, who here has read 2 books, both published in the 70s, Jane Jacobs' Life or Death of American Cities, or Robert Moses' The Power Broker, everyone put their hands up. I went, that's storytelling. Everyone in that room had read those 2 books, and despite $1 trillion worth of advertising, no one came an advert. I said, storytelling, you always remember a film, you always remember a book, you always remember, it's so powerful, it sits in your mind for such a long time. I think that is the power of storytelling, the way that other things just can't hear that.
Show up, listen, and be willing to share. I would say so.
I think our power is feeling, as regular people and as filmmakers make us feel things, and if we feel things, we will react. Let's say something like that.
Thank you so much, thank you. Outside for those who want to.